Hey, it's Captain Mike over at fishyourassoff.com, and for those of you not familiar with me, I'm an inshore fishing guide here on the Treasure Coast of Florida, and my main species are snook, tarpon, redfish, trout. That's something you like catching. Watch this video because what I'm going to cover is the number one mistake that inshore anglers make when it comes to lure choice. Picking the right lure for the right fishing scenario. And that's very important. People just overlook it a lot. They'll have a go-to, whatever it is. You know, like say it's a 3-inch paddle tail, and that's all they fish. Well, there's a lot of times when, you know, the fish are feeding on something like this, you know, 6 inches, 7 inches, and you're fishing with an itty-bitty thing like this. Well, those fish are not going to be interested in your presentation. So you need to know when to fish, different size, profile. Profile is a big deal. If they're feeding on little minnow, long skinny things, well, you don't want to throw something big and beefy at them. You want to throw something long and skinny at them. But if they're feeding on something that's big and beefy, you want to throw something big and beefy. So you really have to match your size, your profile. You got to get the right color, and you really want the right weight as far as you know, how far it needs to get down in the water column, and things like that. So that's really what I'm going to cover today, okay? Because all these are very important. So we've all heard match to hatch. Everyone's heard match to hatch. Well, if the fish are targeting what? A lot of times you don't know what they're targeting, so then just pitch your favorite, right? And I go from small and just get progressively bigger if I don't know. If I can't see a bunch of bait around, I'll start with a 3-inch and not get anything, go to 4-inch, whatever, 5-inch. And say I'm fishing with something light, well, I might switch to something dark. You know, I'll just keep trying until I figure out what they want. But a lot of times it's very obvious. You're like, okay, well, there's a bunch of threadfin herring, they're this big, and you know, they're silver. So why don't I pitch something light, roughly that size and roughly that profile at them? It might be you know, in that case, pilchards or threadfin herring, white baits. You know, you might use something hard like a miridine or something like that, a suspending thing that looks exactly like it. If you're one of the people like me and you're usually sticking to soft plastics, well, you're not going to want to go with something that's very minnow-like, you know, just long and cylindrical, right? You're going to want to go with something with more of a profile to it, with a little bit thicker type body. You know, maybe something like this you're going to go with, or you might go with something that has more of a body profile like that, if that's what you're going for. Now these are big, so I mean, are you dealing with bigger, you know, bigger white baits or smaller white baits? And these are all these things that you have to take into consideration. I really think people drop the ball on this. You know, like I said, I'm a charter guide. I have to get people on fish, and I'm usually fishing with lures, or they're not happy. So you really, really need to dial in when it comes to that. So you want to have a few different rods set up for you. My suggestion would be, if you find the bait, match it. Okay, whatever. If you know that they're feeding on a little teeny finger mullet, match that. Water clarity is a big deal. So, well, that's not a very good presentation for this. But anyways, these are root beer 4-inch DOAs with a chartreuse tail. Now that's a great bait when the water's cloudy. It just is. You know, going with something a little darker. A lot of my stuff, you'll notice, is either glow or white. Yeah, something light like that is really a good choice most of the time around where I'm at, where the water's typically more clear. Your jig head size. This is another thing that's so very important. When you are fishing a zone, and you don't know where the feeding zone is. So you don't know if they're feeding lower, closer to the bottom, mid-tide, mid-water column, or higher. You have to fish all those areas to just see where the feeding fish are. So say you're on a flat and it's 2 feet deep. Well, you're really going to need something light to cover that. A 1/8 ounce jig head, and you might have to move it relatively fast to get it through there without getting it snagged on the bottom or whatever. That's a great scenario for a topwater bait too, because you can really cover that. And there's plenty of huge fish in 2 feet of water. People miss a lot of fish. I mean, you can pull, 38-inch fish, snook out of 2 feet of water. There's huge trout or huge redfish are a lot of times in 2 feet of water if it's a very untouched area and like first thing in the morning, there's no boats around, something like that. So you really need the lure to match the lure to what's going on. So shallow water like that, you need something to go shallow. Deeper water, you're going to need something to go deeper. So when you're fishing these scenarios, most of the scenarios I use, I'm going to be fishing with something 1/8, 3/16, quarter, or 3/8. That's usually what I'm fishing with. It's going to be something like that fits that. And then you have two more choices you have to make. Are you going to be fishing with something that's a long shank or a short shank if you're fishing with these jig heads? All right? So if you're fishing with a short shank, well, that's going to be something that's going to go great with a 3-inch paddle tail type of thing, or a 3-inch jerkbait type of thing. You could probably even go up to, and I think those are like 4-inch, maybe 4 and 4.25. I think those get up to. But once you start getting up to the bigger ones, these are 5.5-inch jerk baits. You're really going to want to move up to the longer shank. You're just going to catch more fish because there's less room for error when they're grabbing behind. And if you are missing a lot of them, slow down your presentation. A lot of times that's all that's wrong. So when it comes to having the right size lure, profile lure, color lure, and weight lure, you have to figure this out when you're out there. You don't get locked in like, hey man, I hear you, but I pitch an 1/8 ounce jig head and I pitch 3-inch paddle tails and that's my jam. That's what I do. It works. It always works. I think you're kidding me at this point. It doesn't always work because those fish don't want anything to do with a 3-inch paddle tail if they're feeding on 5-inch mullet. They just don't. So you need to have enough diversity of size, jig head weights, or just weights in general if you're fishing flare hawk jigs or something like that, and colors, profiles to really dial in to catch more fish. Now, if you're just a weekend warrior, you just want to catch some Jackson ladyfish, it kind of doesn't matter, okay? Fish whatever you want, because they're going to eat it either way. But when you really want to dial in on my Fab 4, tarpon, snook, redfish, trout, you really want to match it. And there's some times, shoot, I didn't bring those out. There's some times when what you want to use is not even a fish profile. It might be a shrimp profile that you're going to use. So, getting yourself some shrimp too, because a lot of times in the winter months, they're not messing around with fish at all. Most of them in my area are really dialed in on shrimp. So at that point, you want to get away from the bait fish type of profiles and sizes, and you want to go for the shrimp. And again, size matters with this. A 3, 4, maybe even 5-inch shrimp is going to be the pattern that you want. For the most part with the shrimp, I've noticed that a more natural presentation works great. Something kind of clear with either a coppery or gold or silvery glitter in it is really going to be the way to go when it comes to winter fishing, matching the shrimp that are around there. But that, to me, that's the number one mistake that fishermen make, inshore fishermen, when it comes to is lure choice. You know, they just pick the wrong thing. They have a go-to that they're interested in, and that's all they fish. They won't fish anything that's not that, and that's a mistake. That is a mistake right here. And sometimes you can go with some kind of off-the-wall things. You might think I'm crazy. That's a frog, right? But look how beefy it is. It's a beefy presentation. So sometimes when they're really feeding on some of these bigger things, you can even throw a frog on there. This right here, you can pitch this up underneath mangroves or a dock. You'd be surprised how many redfish and snook a frog presentation. Just because it's beefier, it gets a lot of wiggle when it's going through there. So the point of this one is, don't get locked in on your 3-inch paddle tail. I know that's what so many people use and swear by. They're like, man, I fish pearl 3-inch paddle tails. It catches everything. Great, great. But you will catch more fish if you downsize when the bait's small, upsize when the bait's bigger, profile and make them skinnier when they're fishing on when they're eating a lot of the minnow type forage, and then beef it up when they're feeding on the bigger bodied fish. I'm telling you right now, you're definitely going to catch more fish like that. You're definitely going to catch more fish like that. You don't need a lot of colors. You need something dark and something light, and then you know, something more natural. What do I have that's natural around here? I don't know. I guess these Houdini color things are pretty natural. So that's really all you're going to need is when you're messing around in your tackle box. So you don't have to go crazy on colors, but you do have to go crazy when it comes to sizes and profile and weight of your jig heads to get it down in a water column. You know, if you're fishing the bottom in 10 feet of water, 1/8 ounce jig head just isn't going to work for you. So you might have to step up to a 1/4 ounce. Heck, you might need a 1/2 ounce to get down there. So that's what's important when it comes to lure choice for inshore fishing. For, again, like I say, tarpon, snook, redfish, trout. Hope I covered everything. If I didn't, just put a comment in there. Nice ones. I prefer on what I missed, and I'll cover it on some other thing. But yeah, I would say that this is covering most of what you need to know when it comes to size of your lure, profile of your lure, color of your lure, and weight of your lure, because you want to find the fish and get the area where they're actually feeding fish. I think that's it for today. So until next time, I'll see you then.